I decided to paint Jungkook. This was originally going to be fluffy white clouds on a blue sky, but the color reminded me a lot of their MV and song Euphoria, specifically that scene where Jungkook has his arms out and his bomber jacket is blown in the wind and you see like the backside. So I decided to do that. And I think this might turn into a series because in my last acrylic painting was Jimin's Serendipity, and it was just going to be that one. I didn't think I was going to get back into acrylic, but I really wanted to add Jungkook to this painting. And then I now want to do the rest of their members and their solo stuff that they have done. So yeah, that might be a thing. Also, it took so long to film this because it's been really cloudy lately where I live, and it's really nice outside, but for filming and painting, not so much, because it creates these really awful shadows and it gets really dark and then it gets really light and I have to adjust the lighting on my camera, and I'm too broke to buy actual lights, like studio lights. So yeah, maybe don't expect an A+ kind of video. And now I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I got my voice back, which is great because in my last video I sounded like I was dying. So hopefully this will be a bit of an improvement. So about this painting. Usually when I work with acrylics, I like to plan what I'm gonna paint and how I'm gonna go about it. For example, I like to paint what is the background first, so then on top of the background I can paint what is in the middle and then for and etc. But even if I plan it, I don't always follow what I plan. Sometimes I'll be thinking of one thing and I'll end up painting something completely different. For example, here it was supposed to be clouds, ended up being Jungkook. You know what I mean. But when I do go with what I'm planning, I like to leave white, or I don't paint what is gonna be the middle ground or foreground. For example, if I would have planned this one, I would have just painted the background blue and left where Jungkook was standing white, so I could have like a nice color when I go in to paint him. But because I didn't plan it, I had to end up painting over the blue sky. So that required a few layers of paint. I struggled with the hair a little bit because I wanted to kind of have a bit of blue in there so his hair wasn't just black, but I didn't know how to go about it, so I just kind of started using the usual streaky motion that I always use for hair, but it wasn't giving me the result that I wanted, so I just kept messing with it until eventually I got what I needed. And even when I thought I was done, I ended up going back and adding a few touch-ups to it once it was dry, and I didn't film that whole process because it was a long process. But this isn't a tutorial, so I think I can get away with that. For the bomber jacket, I really liked how my sketch turned out. I really loved how the creases and the folds in his bomber jacket looked. But because I had to paint and add a few layers to get the color that I wanted, I ended up covering up my original sketch. And instead of being a good artist and going back to look at what I had originally drawn, I was very confident in myself that I'd figure it out, and it looks like he's wearing a very baggy jacket or a very baggy hoodie because it looks like cloth rather than like a bomber jacket material. Anyways, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I mean, in the end, I'm happy with how it turned out. I wish I would have shaded things differently and maybe not made such large creases in the fabric. But it is what it is, and you learn from what you do. So several coats later and hours of waiting for paint to dry, I finally got the color that I wanted, and it was time to go in and start shading. I struggled with this a little bit because usually when I'm doing shadows and highlights, I like to add them in as I'm painting. But because I wanted that really bright, vibrant yellow jacket, I couldn't do that, or else the shadows and the highlights would get lost underneath all those layers of paint. So that kind of threw me off. And at one point, I even stopped painting the area that I was on and moved on to a different area because I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, I'll come back to it later. It wasn't until I started painting this side of the arm that I actually started to like how it looked. I mean, I still think if I could repaint this, I would do the creases and the folds differently, but in the end, I was quite happy with how it turned out. Like, I don't hate it, but I do wish that I would have done the folds differently. Also, I got so into shading those folds that I completely forgot the logo or that word thing that he has on the back of his coat. And it wasn't until I was done filming and like in the midst of editing that I noticed that, and I was like, well, can't add that in now because one, I don't want to ruin those folds, and two, it's just gonna take too much time to try and fit that into the video and edit it, so I just left that out. And even after it's all painted and all hung up and whatnot, I still didn't add that in. Also, you may have noticed in the beginning, or maybe you didn't notice because it wasn't that obvious, but there was like a line at the bottom. I was planning to have him standing behind a fence because the painting was looking very bare. Like in Jimin, he had the curtain, he had the ocean, he had the clouds, but this one was very naked. So I was like, I'll just add a little fence or something. But I kind of liked how plain it was. It was very minimal, and I decided to not do the fence at all. So yeah, this is the final look. I do want to keep practicing with acrylics and get better. I know that there's a lot for me to learn, but for now, this is all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I can see you in my next video.